Good evening. It is 6:45, and this is a meeting of the District Records Commission on Thursday, December 10th, 2020. This meeting is a meeting of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education District Records Commission in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be construed or considered as a public community meeting. There will be no public participation during the committee meeting. Mr. Lyman, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Dr. Kozad?
Here.
And Mr. Liming here.
Thank you. Mr. Lyman, will you please review do the review of records for disposal?
Right, we do have records that are available for disposal according to our schedule, but we're not, I'm sorry. We do have records according to our schedule that are available for disposal, but the fact that they are available for disposal doesn't mean we have to destroy them at this time. So I'd rather wait for a couple years and do one big review of the whole storage situation and then get rid of the records that, according to our new policy, can be destroyed at that time. So I'd rather just say tonight that we met and determined that there are no records to be destroyed at this time. Recommended to be destroyed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve the records retention schedule effective January 1st, 2021?
First.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Questions?
Just no discussion would be, I think the old one was passed in 2002. So we definitely needed to update this. Lots changed since then. So. And this is recommended by the Historical Society, the one we're approving.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, this is, again, this is what the Ohio History Connection has recommended, and we aren't making any changes to what they're recommending. It's a straight recommendation from the Ohio History Connection for records retention schedule.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Dr. Kozad?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman? Yes.
Motion passes. I move that we dismiss the District Records Commission. Do we have a second?
Second.
And Mr. Lyman, call the roll.
Okay. Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Dr. Kozad?
Yes.
And Mr. Liming? Yes.
All right, the commission is dismissed. Thank you.
That was perfect.
Yes.
I'm sure. I'm glad I got it.
I'm glad it was live streamed.
That's right. And you're the lucky ones that got to come in free.
I know. Like,
Hey, David, for the resolution about the rejecting the fair school fund plan, is that something that, something you want to read, that Kevin wants to read?
Yeah, he wanted to talk about it a little bit.
For the whole long,
Yeah,
it's really long.
yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you bet.
How you doing?
That's really long.
Are we part of it?
Yes.
You want to read it, Kevin?
I'll just read the whole thing.
You what?
I'll read the whole thing.
Okay.
How about if I read it, since I'm really familiar with the wording changes I put in it, so I can do
That'd be fine.
the emphasis on the right areas.
Okay. And you can. Yeah, since it is.
It's long and long. Hopefully, Josh can project it as well, so that people can see it.
I think like talking to the differences that I feel that
Yeah.
this?
We do want to read the whole thing. Do we have to read the whole thing? Should we read the whole thing? Okay, I'm happy to read it. We don't necessarily need to discuss elements of it, other than to say fair school funding plan does not provide any real additional money to funding Ohio. It's projected on economic growth only. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, if you would like to, I would certainly like you to do that.
Okay,
component.
yeah. And then, so if it passes, did you get a chance to look at the media release then? Are you in agreement with it?
I did not look at it yet,
Okay, all
so
right.
that was crazy.
Okay.
You
You have another job, right?
I do.
So, do we have to keep these masks on since we're 6 feet apart? What's okay? So we didn't interview and stuff up maybe.
Yeah, I was hoping not to, but
It's
it just opens us up.
yeah.
It's perceptions.
Yep. What else here? And then I'm gonna, I think, so we talked about, I think it'd be good if you talk about the conduct of
Good evening, everyone. It is now 7 o'clock on Thursday, December 10th, 2020. This meeting is a meeting of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. It is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. Mr. Lyman, would you please call the roll?
Okay, Mr. Carpenter,
Here.
Mrs. Long,
Here.
Mr. Price,
Here.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Here.
All right, would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this evening we have the opportunity to recognize a longtime employee who is retiring. And that is our Transportation Director, Bev Wetzel. Bev? Bev has been with our district for 30 years. She started out as a bus driver in 1990 through 1992, so 2 years as a bus driver, then 8 years as a library specialist at Sugarcreek Elementary in Stephenville, and then 2 more years as the Transportation Secretary, and then 18 years as the Transportation Coordinator. That's amazing. Join me in applause for that. Bev has also served as the West Region Director with the Ohio Association of Pupil Transportation. It's an organization for everything. Isn't there? Yes. Congratulations on that. So with that, we present this certificate in recognition of 30 years service to the students of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek School District. Congratulations. All right. Mr. Lyman, would you give the treasurer's report, please?
Sure. Do I get a motion to approve the minutes of the November 12th meeting as presented with the agenda?
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman?
Second.
Mr. Price? Any questions or corrections for the minutes from last regular meeting? All right, Mr. Lang, please call the roll.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, motion passes.
Okay, I have the, if I get a motion to approve the treasurer's report for the month ending November 2020.
So moved.
Mrs. Long, and second, Mrs. Sloughman.
So just to close, the same reports that I always do, the 2 pie charts showing where the money comes in and where it goes out, where it goes to. I have the balances in the general fund for the last 20 years in a spreadsheet, and I have 2 other financial reports showing budget versus actual, and then the 1 sheet that the auditor suggested I put in there to show how we balance out the bank at the end of each month. And I don't have anything specific really to point out unless we have any questions on anything.
All right, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long.
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the tax rates set by the Greene County Budget Commission at 4.31 mils for 2021 to fund the bond retirement fund and bring in an estimated $2,792,000 for
So moved.
2021.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman? Now, this isn't new funds, and this is a regular event. Each year it gets
Right.
set at a certain rate. Can you
Right.
Expand on that.
Right. Once a bond issue is passed to build a building, then it's up to the budget commission in the county, which consists of the county auditor, the county treasurer, and the county prosecuting attorney. And they determine what millage needs to be assessed in order to raise enough money to pay the principal and interest on the bond that we're paying off. It's basically like paying back a loan, and then they determine that millage. So as property values go up, or if they go down, that millage would go up or down to raise the right amount of money. And then we have to approve it each time. I don't know what would happen if we voted no, but we'll prove that as set by the budget commission to fund our bond issue.
And that's the same as it was last year?
Yes, hasn't changed, right?
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, please call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. Sloughman?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes,
Mrs. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
motion passes.
Can I get a motion to approve the Superintendent's Advisory Council as the financial advisory committee for the district for the purposes of reviewing audits, 5-year forecasts, and other financial documents, as it's a requirement of the auditor's office that we have a financial advisory committee. And this is what we would like to set for that committee.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Price, second from Mrs. Long. Any discussion, questions?
Who's on this committee?
This is Superintendent Advisory Committee?
Yeah, so this is community members that are on this committee along with me and Mrs. Sigmund. So there's
Basically,
probably 15 or 20 community members on that.
and it's just the only thing we do as far as a financial advisory committee is we present the audit to them and say, here's what the auditor found, and this is what we're going to do to try to prevent that from happening next year. And anybody have any questions about that, we explain it further. It's just a review. It's not, they don't make any decisions for the district, the committee. And then we've always had one board member on it too. I think we're going to.
The Superintendent Advisory Committee has been meeting for about a year or so. And so this is just, we already had a group of people, community members that were meeting just to share information with them. And we thought it'd be nice if we also shared some financial information and also make it a financial advisory committee.
All right, any other questions? All right, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve as 2 new funds the last 2 grants that we received, the Title III English Language Learners Fund and the Expanding Opportunities for Each Child Fund?
So moved.
Mr. Price,
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman. Any questions from the board? All right, call the roll.
Mrs. Long, Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, motion passes.
And then now that we've approved those funds, could I get a motion to amend final appropriations for fiscal year 21 to add those funds that we've approved into our appropriations, our budget?
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Second.
Mr. Price. Any questions? All right, please call the roll.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long.
Yes.
motion passes. And our dog agrees to. For correspondence, we received a number, I know that I did, and I know other board members did too, a number of suggestions or recommendations of the candidates. We interviewed for the open board position. As most of you probably know, we had a vacancy in our board as a result of the death of Mary France on November 29th. Mary served with on our board for 31 years, and served in the community in a whole variety of ways, and she will be sorely missed. But the law requires that we respond relatively quickly and replace a vacancy on the board no sooner than 10 days after the vacancy happens and no later than 30 days after the vacancy has occurred. So particularly with the time of year that it is, we responded relatively quickly. We did interviews for 10 candidates, which were all 10 candidates applied. We did an interview with each candidate. Today is day 11, and we will have an executive session determination of which of the 10 candidates we'll select for that open position. In the process of selecting a candidate, or excuse me, a person for the vacancy on the board, in law, there isn't any real stipulation as to the process that you can go through. The board can choose somebody that they've eyed for a while as a candidate, or the board can go through a process of selecting, announcing candidates. Our policy says that we will announce and that we will accept applications for that position. So we made that announcement. We had it open for 3 business days, I believe, and then we scheduled interviews with each of the 10 candidates. 5 interviews were held on Monday evening, and 5 more on Tuesday evening of this week. So each candidate had a 30-minute time slot, and each candidate had 13 questions or comments from the board, and all candidates got the same set of questions. Mr. Price, you wanted to comment on that?
What I'd like to do is actually read the questions for the attendees of this, for those that are watching virtually. As you zoom in on, as Josh zoomed in on the screen, you'll be able to see what those questions were. So I'm going to read these. We'll see from here. The following questions were read verbatim to the candidates during the interviews for the board position. Number 1, why are you interested in becoming a board member? Can everybody hear me okay in the back? Sure, especially back there. Are there aspects of your education and experience you feel would be especially helpful in this position? Number 3, are you willing to spend the necessary time to familiarize yourself with the school district's operations and to keep up with the ever-changing business of schools? Number 4, what are the top 2 or 3 things you think our schools do well? Number 5, where do you see that we need to make our biggest improvement? Number 6, are you familiar with the distinct roles of the board and superintendent? How do you understand the separation of duties between the board's policy-making responsibilities and the superintendent's and treasurer's administrative responsibilities? Number 7, this job comes with criticism. How do you respond to criticism? Number 8, it's actually 8A and B here, so quite related. Are you familiar with school funding, and can you describe how our schools are financed with respect to local funding and state funding? Number 8, can you describe how school system revenue is impacted by inflation and changes in property values? Number 9, we are considering a levy for 2021. What are your thoughts on a levy, and what would you recommend? Number 10, if you disagree with others, can you separate this difference and proceed as a team member after a decision is made and support the decision of the group? And I want to really emphasize the notes associated with this particular question. At no time was any candidate asked if he or she would be willing to change a vote on any matter to match the vote of the majority, nor was such an expectation implied in any way whatsoever. Any candidate, other person that insinuates that is falsifying reality, fabricating what happened, and frankly, blatantly lying. Number 11, do you believe in training for board members? Are you willing to participate in training sessions? Number 12, are there any ways you serve in the school board meeting? Those are the questions. None other.
And then finally, we did remind our candidates about the meeting schedule, so on a regular basis, and that the compensation for being a board member is $125 for each official board meeting, which doesn't include going to training sessions or participating in tailgate talks or coffees with the superintendent or any of the other myriad of public community information sessions. So there was a fair amount of input and recommendations. I don't know if anybody kept track of the number that they got.
I think Mrs. Long got 6 phone calls, 5 texts, and several letters, as the rest of us did.
Yeah, there were a number of emails. So that was it. That's it for correspondence. Next, we go to a resolution to reject the Fair School Funding Plan as introduced in the Senate Companion Bill to substitute House Bill 305 and to encourage the 133rd General Assembly to revise and properly fund the bill in order to comply with the Ohio Constitution. Mr. Lemming, you want to read the, do you want to read the resolution, please?
I'm sorry, I was going to read the resolution.
Mr. Price, you
Okay.
said Mr. Lyming.
Mr. Lemming, I'm so sorry.
The
No,
wrong
I do mean Mr. Price. Thank you very much.
And we're going to have some tad discussion on this, correct?
Yes.
The, just for context, for those of you that can recall last February, I believe it was, we had Representative Cupp come in and talk to us about the Cupp-Patterson plan. It is the only thing on the burner for a revision of school funding from the state of Ohio. If those of you that were here or you subsequently done other research on your own, you will have learned that this particular school funding plan essentially does nothing for this school system. When and if it's fully funded, this district would get on the order of $145,000 extra from the state. There's some other allowances that will get some additional money back to it, but for an apples-to-apples comparison based on the spreadsheet that the Ohio School Board Association has provided, and also that's available from the state offices. The easiest way is to compare the rightmost column, which adds up per district what the differences would be. Notably, and we had a teleconference with Representative Patterson, so the other part of the Patterson plan, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And what was interesting is we learned the state is actually not allocating, or I should say, collecting additional revenue to fund the schools. Rather, they were predicating the extra money that they were going to put towards the plan based on economic growth. Well, economic growth right now is probably pretty stagnant. So the reality of that plan getting funded sufficiently based on economic growth is rather low. But more importantly, it's not real money. If you're not collecting additional revenue from taxation, or you're not taking finances from another pot and putting them in your education pot, you're realizing no real substantive benefit for our school systems. If you look at that particular spreadsheet I referred to, Kettering is slated to get $16 million when it will be fully funded 6 years from now. Bellbrook, $145,000. So clearly there are some issues with the plan. That said, it is vociferously supported by the Ohio School Board Association, by multiple representatives. It passed the House last week, 87-8 vote, I believe it was. And it's right now kind of stalled in the Senate. But I think the Senate's not particularly liking it because they see about a $2 billion price tag associated with it. even though it's not really a $2 billion price tag, because it's predicated on economic growth, not actual new taxation or allocation from other funding or expenses. So anyway, I'm going to read a resolution. At that time, we will discuss among ourselves here as board members and see if we choose to accept this resolution, which frankly is a counter to the resolution that the Ohio School Board Association was advocating. They were very strongly advocating for this funding plan. And as I see it, I think as we're going to see it as a community, this is not favorable. The state of Ohio does not appropriately fund its school systems. Therefore, it continues to make the school systems throughout the state overly and heavily reliant on property taxes. Hence, you see the recurring necessity of property taxes coming back levies to the community. So I'm going to read, and this is boring. I'm sorry. This is whereases and therefores and thou shalt and blah blah. But this is the way when you want to get people's attention that you craft the words. So bear with me. As I read this, it's going to be rather cumbersome.
You can do it.
But give it adequate consideration as well. So I got to find it. Give me a second.
First page, there you go.
Again, keep in mind, this was built, I'm the one proposing this, I'm the one that put the words together and putting it forth as a motion tonight. I took, again, the OSBA resolution and modified it in certain ways they would not appreciate. But here we go. The Board of Education in Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Local School District met in regular session on December 10th, 2020 with the following members present. The treasurer or treasurer pro tempore, as the case may be, advise the board that the notice requirements of section 122.22 of the revised code and the implementing rules adopted by the board pursuant thereto were complied with for the meeting. Kevin Price moved the adoption of the following resolution. A resolution to reject the Fair School Funding Plan as introduced in the Senate Companion Bill to substitute House Bill 305 and to encourage the 133rd General Assembly to revise and properly fund the bill in order to comply with the Ohio Constitution. What follows is wording largely educational wording that came from OSBA, which you'll be able to tell pretty quickly where what I'm proposing diverges from what the OSBA could have advocated. Here comes the first whereas. Whereas the Ohio Supreme Court ruled in the Roth versus State of Ohio 1997 that Ohio's method for funding schools through the state's school foundation program was unconstitutional under Article 6, Section 2 of the Ohio Constitution. Whereas in the Roth, the Ohio Supreme Court declared that Ohio's school funding session was over-reliant on property taxes and as such was inherently discriminatory to children based on where they reside, for disparities exist between communities of affluence and impoverishment. Whereas since the Roth decision, the Ohio General Assembly has failed to create a funding system that meets Ohio's constitutional standard of securing a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state. And whereas Ohio's solution to satisfy the Ohio Supreme Court's order has been to pass a series of biennial budgets containing politically expedient remedies that have not eliminated the over-reliance on local property tax or mitigated the discriminatory nature inherent in a series of funding fixes legislated over the last 23 years. And whereas Ohio's previous biennial budget crafted by the 132nd Ohio General Assembly and effective July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, created a funding system with capped districts and districts receiving a minimum level of funding referred to as guaranteed. I'm sorry, I know this is boring, but it's going to get better here in just a minute. I'll get some juicy language in here. So, and whereas the previous biennial budget identified 503 school districts out of 610, or 82%, either capped in their funding or only guaranteed, which is a testament that Ohio's funding model is not effective. And whereas Ohio's current biennial budget crafted by the 133rd General Assembly froze foundation funding for Ohio schools at 2019 fiscal year levels, effectively placing all districts on the guarantee. while funding levels have subsequently been cut due to the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. And whereas the current school funding system in Ohio lacks a rational basis for determining both the cost of educating students, how the funding of education is shared between the state and local taxpayers. And whereas Representatives Robert Cupp and Representative John Patterson convened a statewide work group made up of 8 practicing school district CFO, treasurers, and 8 practicing superintendents, the Cupp-Patterson work group, to devise a new formula recognizing Ohio needs an overhaul to its school funding system. I've spent the last 3 years determining inputs necessary to fund a thorough and efficient system of common schools that reduces the over-reliance on local property tax and creates equity in the state foundation system. And whereas the Cupp-Patterson program carefully analyzed national research, best practices, actual Ohio school district spending data, and drew on their own extensive experience in educating students and operating school districts to make recommendations for a school funding system that meets the needs of all Ohio students in the 21st century. Whereas the Patterson Work Group developed recommendations that laid out a rational, transparent, comprehensive, and most of all, fair system for funding schools based on the actual cost to provide a basic education for all students in Ohio, the base cost. And whereas the Patterson Work Group developed a method of sharing the funding of the base cost between the state and local taxpayers that will force districts to remain over-reliant on property taxes. Like I said, it's going to get better here. And whereas adjustments to revenue from voted property tax levies as a result of property value changes are prohibited by House Bill 920, thus forcing districts to return to their communities on a recurring basis for additional property tax levies for school funding to address the impacts of inflation. And whereas continuing to force districts to be overly reliant on property taxes places them in a precarious financial situation wherein levy failures can result in catastrophic, irreparable damages to both the content and quality of education districts can provide. And whereas, based on the research and work outlined above, the Cupp-Patterson Work Group produced and recommended the Fair School Funding Plan, which was introduced in House Bill 305 and is currently incorporated into and approved upon in a companion bill in the Senate, Senate Bill 376. And whereas the Fair School Funding Plan would, by forcing districts to remain over-reliant on property taxes, continue to violate Article 6, Section 2 of the Ohio Constitution, which states, "The General Assembly shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise, as, with the income arising from the school trust fund, will secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state." And whereas the Ohio General Assembly and the Governor of Ohio are missing an opportunity with the Fair School Funding Plan to devise a formula with sufficient additional and necessary state-provided funding, which would make a fitting and proper investment in Ohio's children and Ohio's future. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Local School District that Section 1, it is necessary to reject the Fair School Funding Plan as introduced in Senate Bill 376 of the 133rd General Assembly, the Senate Companion Bill, House Bill 305, as it fails to ensure that K-12 schools in Ohio are funded using a school funding system that complies with the Ohio Constitution, and which would eliminate over-reliance on property taxes as directed by the Ohio Supreme Court in the 1997 law decision. Section 2, the Treasurer is authorized to deliver or cause to be delivered a certified copy of this resolution to community leaders, members of the Ohio House of Representatives and Ohio Senate, including Representatives Cupp, Patterson, Corrales, and Senators Sykes and Lana, to the office of Governor Michael DeWine. The resolution shall be enforced and effect immediately upon its adoption, which we'll see here in a couple minutes. Sorry for that, but hopefully, whereas and therefore get old, but toward the end, or 2/3 of the way through, you can see how we meet. Basically, really try to boil it down to the reality of schools and what they face in Ohio, and what we're really seeing in our district on steroids. So that's what I'd like to open up for discussion, see if we can come to a consensus on whether it passes or not.
First of all, I'll second the motion. And we'll go into the other discussion. I'd like to comment that I also wrote to our representatives in the House, urging them to oppose House Bill 305 for those same kinds of reasons. It doesn't really provide us the funding that we need. It still provides us with pushing that funding and so forth back to the local community for property taxes, which only creates division in communities and doesn't really resolve the issue of funding. So those are, and I concur with what you prepared and written. Mrs. Lockman, anything else? Mrs. Long, do you want to comment? Okay, nothing at this time. Okay. All right then. Please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right. Thank you, Mr. Price. All right, reports to the board. Mrs. Adams.
Well, good evening. I am Jill Adams. I'm the principal of Bell Creek Intermediate. First, I'd like to say welcome to the Board of Education members, Dr. Kozad, Mr. Wyming, and everybody who came out tonight. I wanted to share some good things that are happening this year at Bell Creek Intermediate. So I'm going to start by taking you back to December of 2019. The reason that we're all here tonight is Bell Creek always has the distinct honor of hosting the December board meeting because our 5th grade choir is so wonderful, led by Mrs. Julie Wellbaum, and it's an opportunity to showcase them, to welcome their parents in. We usually have a packed crowd of very happy and excited people here. So that is why you're at Bell Creek tonight. So we're going to move on to August.
And we're sorry we don't see them tonight.
I'm sorry you don't see them tonight too. Obviously they're not here tonight. We have social distancing requirements, indoor singing requirements to consider, and then also lighting cut reductions to consider with stipend. So we're here in August 2020, and the first thing that I wanted to tell you that's going well, we had students coming back to school using a hybrid model, so we got to see them in small groups, and we got to teach them things that we don't usually have to, like how to stay safe at school by staying far away from each other. Students have learned to greet their friends and their teachers this year in different ways. You might see a thumbs up, a virtual high five, or an elbow bump to replace a handshake or a hug, or a regular high five that you might usually see. So we'll move into September. The picture on the left shows our Bell Creek gym. Mrs. Sasha Taylor, our gym teacher, has done a fantastic job of using lots of tape on the floor of our gym to make sure that each student, even in the 100% in-person model, has plenty of space to participate in gym. She also has put some pretty in-depth sanitizing procedures in place to make sure that students can still use jump ropes, basketballs, and things like that to provide as normal experience as possible this year. The middle slide represents Mr. Anderson's 9/11 Good Deed Challenge. Mr. Anderson does this activity every year, and he was able to go ahead and do it this year as well. He challenges his students to complete good deeds in their home or in their community. They then send in a picture, they write about it, share it with the class, and then as you can see, they post it on the wall for everyone to see. The picture on the right shows, it was kind of completed as we came back to 100% with all of the students here. These are Ms. Tobin's students. They are drawing self-portraits as they shared with each other in the class to get to know each other, to kind of see behind the mask. They had their mask on in the picture and all day long, but we did a lot of work to develop relationships in September. So that moves us to October. We had our first Spirit Week of the year in October to celebrate the end of the first quarter. This is just a sampling of some of the wonderful spirited students and teachers at Bell Creek. I have to say this was one of my favorite weeks of the year because every morning I'm outside at car duty as kids are dropped off. We see kids, they get out of the car, they have their masks, all their things, and they trudge in. But this week, they got out of their cars dressed like this. So they every day had something either very fancy or unique or unusual. I could see the smile in their eyes, even though I couldn't see it in their face. This felt like a really normal activity and something fun to look forward to at school. It was also really fun to see the smiles on the parents' faces as they dropped them off. Because I think to parents too, it felt like a bit of normalcy, kids dressed up and having fun at school. So that takes us to November. November was a very important month in our country. There was a big election. There were important local issues, national issues. At Bell Creek, the important issue is which candy is our favorite. Mrs. Geis's fifth grade class led our school through the election to find our favorite candidate. Her class made posters, they made commercials that we showed during our lunch announcements. They made stickers for kids to wear on Post-it notes and on tape, trying to promote their candidate. All staff and students voted using a Google form and Google Classroom, and then the winner was announced. If you're wondering who it was, as I'm sure you all are, the Reese Cup is the candy of choice at Bell Creek. That takes us to December. The first two pictures here show a fifth grade project. Students are collaborating by talking to each other, and each one of them built their own tiny house. So students in this class were learning about measurement, about space and design. They were especially challenged, some of them, to put together the outside of the house as well as the inside of the house. They had to make sure their doors and windows lined up with the walls and the fixtures inside. So they had a lot of fun with this project. The picture on the right is a sampling of cards that students made from Ms. Hartley's third grade class. These cards were delivered to hospital frontline workers as a way for us to show that we see them, we appreciate everything that they're doing, and it's really important for our students to be able to show their appreciation for others. So we did that in December. Students in third, fourth, and fifth grade participated in this project. So, Josh, if you can advance to the next slide. I'm ending our presentation today just saying we know that we don't know what to expect in the second semester. There's a lot of just, we don't really know what to expect anywhere. We don't know what to expect here, but we know that if we stay positive, that good things will continue to happen at Bell Creek and in Bellbrook in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. All right, the Records Retention Committee.
Yeah, just to further comment on that, Mrs. Adams does a fantastic job here, as do our other principals in their buildings. Just continuing to stay positive, as her message says here, through all the things that are happening, continue to try to find silver linings and things, continue to try to have pieces of normalcy to what's going on. And, in the end of maybe there's some things that we're going to pull out of this whole thing that, well, things we'll continue to do. Some definitely not, but others, we definitely will continue. And that's the other thing when you're pushed to out of your comfort zone a little bit, that maybe some things that you wouldn't normally do, you can do. For example, we have a board member that's virtual. So, a year ago, we would never think of doing that. So that's just one of the little nuances of this whole thing. And we also found out that kids are extremely resilient. They have just done a fantastic job, as have staff. But I know especially the little ones that are, going in the school year are really concerned about the mask and so forth, and they are taking it in stride, and everybody's just doing a fantastic job. Records Retention Committee. So before this meeting, about 6:45, Our records retention committee met, which consists of Mr. Liming, myself, and Mr. Carpenter. And so we discussed all the records as per the records retention schedule that were to be disposed of, and that was none at this time. And then we also approved a new records retention schedule. Our last records retention schedule is from 2002. So we updated that as Ohio History Connection. They have a records retention schedule for schools, for cities, for libraries. And so they have those best practices of documents already out there. So we just took the school document and just adopted it as is. So we'll be doing, we approved that with the Records Retention Committee. Continue on with the Bellbrook Online Academy. That's all right. Our teachers in our Bellbrook Online Academy have been working extremely hard under the leadership of Mrs. Chad, who's done a fantastic job along with those teachers of really taking a lot of feedback from the beginning of the school year to something, again, one of those things that will continue, or other schools will continue as we go along here, of the online option. And so something we have really never done here at Bellbrook, and probably a vast majority of other schools have never done. And so trying to create that right from the beginning. So Mrs. Chad has been leading that and done a fantastic job. But just to give you an update on the numbers here. So overall, semester one, we had 626 students in our BOA. So we have about 2,700 kids overall in our district. So about 626 were in BOA first semester. 426 will be in our second semester of BOA. So they've already had to choose that for next semester that starts in January. So the breakdown in K-2, it's gone from 120 first semester to 66 in the second semester. Grades 3 to 5, we had 154 in the first semester, 89 in the second semester. Grades 6 to 8, we had 194 in the first semester, 125 in the second semester. And so some fairly decent differences in those grade levels. Grade 9 to 12, we have 158 in semester 1. We have 146 in semester 2, so it's been fairly consistent in the second semester there for the high school. We have, and just to, so obviously there's kids that are going from one to the other and kind of crossing paths a little bit. So from BOA, from our online academy to face-to-face, so from going online to returning in person on January 4th, the 246 kids are coming back. And then face-to-face to BOA, we have 46 kids that are going from in-person to BOA second semester. Because again, in first semester to second semester, you could go either way second semester, so you have that option. So again, that's a net difference of about 200 kids there. So at the beginning of the year, we had 18 full-time teachers. And so second semester, we have 14 full-time teachers. So we brought about 4 teachers back into the classroom because obviously there's 200 student difference there. So we brought staff, 1 staff back at Stephen Bell, BCI, and then 2 at the middle school because those numbers dictated that. We are staying with Edmentum. That's the curriculum, that's the program that we used first semester, and our teachers are continuing to utilize that and customizing it to fit the needs of our students. And that really is the piece of it. They're using that curriculum and then again, customizing it, differentiating it to meet the needs of our students. Any questions or anything with that update?
No. I'm pleased to see more students back in the classroom rather than being online. It's a nice trend. I'm happy about that.
Again, a lot of our, some of the, talk about silver lining or, something to take a positive of this. We've had some BOA students that, actually a lot, but just an example of, the kids that are thriving in that arena and are really learning to be self-motivated, to be self-paced, making lists, to, having a to-do list, having a plan for the day, and being a little bit more self-sufficient. And, those are good life skills for anybody, and your BOA students, they're being pushed into that a little bit because that's just the avenue or the medium that they're for BOA. So again, that's one of those things that, we think of a situation like a pandemic that is negative. For them, that could be a real positive as a life skill going on that they really learned at a young age to be self-sufficient, to be self-motivated, and trying to get things done. And you got this huge project to do. You do that one step at a time, one chunk at a time. You don't get overwhelmed. You just got to piece it out. So that's one of those, I think, positives that will come out of this. Moving on to COVID-19 information. So, continuing to gather information, trying to continue to make the best decisions that we can. Again, on Thursdays, there's updates throughout the state and through, each county. Obviously, we're in Greene County, but Montgomery County is right next to us. They've gone from purple to red, so that's a good thing. Also, new quarantine information. I sent out an email, I believe it was last night or the night before, about there's a change in quarantine information from the CDC and the Ohio Department of Education, of Health, ODH, and Greene County Public Health, that these are for asymptomatic students or staff. So, if you're having symptoms, this doesn't apply to you. You still need to quarantine for 14 days, but a 10-day asymptomatic and then a 7-day asymptomatic if you have a negative test at day 5 or later. So, again, trying to keep everybody safe at the same time. If people are asymptomatic, getting them back in the mix a little bit quicker. There's also a study that is supposed to be coming out next week from Ohio State University. It's working with schools throughout the state. Again, you never know when these things actually come out, but it's studying the impact of quarantining in schools and so forth, and possibly changing those rules even more to make them even less. So again, I don't really want to assume that the information will be out there, but that study is coming out at the same point, and when that study comes out, we'll continue to work with the public health department and try and make the best decisions as possible. Just to give you some information, obviously we went hybrid on November 16th. Our COVID totals, so one of the reasons we did that is from November 2nd to the 15th, we had 19 student confirmed positive cases, 4 staff confirmed, and we quarantined due to those. Again, so these quarantines are due to those positive cases. We quarantined just under 400 students because of that, and 15 staff members. Again, that is due to those confirmed positive cases. There are other people being quarantined because of positive cases that are outside of the school. So that's from November 2nd to the 15th. We saw that really big increase, as did everybody else around here or throughout the state. Moving indoors, Halloween, I don't know what, and so forth. So those numbers really spiked. So we went to hybrid. So from November 16th to December 6th, so that's through this last Sunday, we had 13 positive cases. So 19 was the other from the 2nd to the 15th. So we had 13 positive student cases, 4 staff, which is the same amount we had during 2nd and the 15th. And we only quarantined 15 students and 7 staff. So, again, one of the major reasons we went to the hybrid is to dramatically reduce the quarantine of students. And it really allowed us to do that because we can socially distance. You can't get down to 0 all the time. But, dramatically reduced that number. So again, we are still struggling with staff because staff is continuing to, they're either out sick or they are maybe having symptoms and are getting tested and they're out during that time. We don't want them to be, in teaching and still waiting test results. And, fortunately over time here, the test results have come back a lot quicker. Those test results, I just saw tests. I don't know what the standard on it is, but it's 4-hour results. I just, read that. So things are coming a lot quicker, which is extremely helpful to us as to everybody else. But we are continuing almost on a daily basis of covering classes with other teachers within the school because substitutes continue to be a problem. We probably only have maybe the same 10 or 15 subs that are throughout the whole district. Again, this just isn't our problem. This is everybody's situation too. So the staff, you know, we're on a tipping point there of really struggling with that on a daily basis. And our staff has just done a fantastic job of stepping up and helping out whenever we need them to help out. Just to kind of name some other districts around here, Beaver Creek is going remote through the 8th, hybrid through the 18th, in grades 6 to 12, K to 5, they're hybrid through the 8th. Xenia is remote through the 1st, Fairborn's remote at least through January 1st. Kettering is remote until they haven't determined what they're doing after break. Centerville is remote until the 19th, and the ESC is looking to possibly go remote after the break too. So I'm continuing to look at all the information, and within the next few days here, we're going to make a decision on what we're going to do for the second half. When we come back for break. So again, continue to take all the information in, and really strongly looking at the hybrid just because of the quarantine situation. But also, we are welcoming 246 students back to our school district that were VOA first semester. So they really have to learn the routines, they have to learn the procedures, they have to learn kind of how we do school now. So we have 246 students that's what really helped at the beginning of the year when we did hybrid, is really get those kids accustomed to what new life is at school. So strongly leaning to the hybrid piece, but we're making that decision the next few days. Again, we understand that this is a burden on parents with childcare and just changing up what's going on. However, we really believe a couple days in school is better than going full remote. That interaction with staff is just critical to making sure that everybody is safe emotionally, socially, academically, and so forth, and keeping track of everybody. So stay tuned for that in the next couple days here. Questions or anything with that particular COVID information? All right, levy discussion. Mr. Lyman, do you want me to start this out and just kind of see where we land on this?
Sounds good, yes.
Yep. So I know we discussed at the last board meeting some options and thoughts about possible future levy. And again, some of those questions that we need to answer is, first of all, when are we going? Secondly, what type of levy is this? And if it's a limited kind of levy, for how long? What millage or dollar amount? And what past reductions to bring back, if anything. So all those things kind of play into the millage amount or the dollar amount and so forth. So go ahead, Mr. Lyman.
I didn't know if you want to touch on this, but the timing issue, we have to have, if we decide to go in May on the ballot, the information has to be filed with the Board of Elections by February 3rd. As usual, we have to have 2 resolutions, 2 different board meetings before we can file anything. We have to have one determining what amount we need, and the resolution would be passed to ask the county auditor to determine what millage would yield that amount of money that we need. So we pass that, get it to David Graham, he returns telling us the millage, and then at the next meeting, we need to pass a resolution to proceed with that information. And then I can take that paperwork and file it by February 3rd. So what we were thinking tonight, we I have, also the part I left out, we have to have a bonding attorney adopt the formal resolution we pass. So when I leave this meeting tonight, I need to know, unless we're going to have several special meetings, I need to know a direction to tell the bonding attorney that it looks like this is what we would like to go for, this millage, this type of levy, this date, if we're going for May. And then he can craft that resolution. We could pass the first one, if it's the wish of the board to do so, at the regular meeting in January. And the second one, at a special meeting we'd have to set sometime in January, which could be, if we do a training session, that's a special meeting, and it could be at that meeting. But as I talked to Dr. Kozad, from my standpoint, I don't like to run up against the last couple of days before February 3rd, because there's a lot of communication has to take place. I have to get some signatures and get it down there. I don't want to miss it. If you're one day late, you don't get it on the ballot. So
That's right.
Sorry. Some other information just to add to that, a mill is now worth $657,000. That's up from $582,000.
You see that again?
A mill is now worth $657,000. That's up from $582,000 last year. So essentially, so that's another piece that could play into this whole thing is the amount of money that we think is necessary to really put us in a very stable situation for the years to come. But the other unknowns here, again, is, we had a $650,000 cut from the state last fiscal year and this fiscal year. We don't know what it will be in the next 3 years of the 5-year forecast. We probably won't know. This is a biennium budget, so we may not know until August. And fiscal year starts July 1. If they're still fighting over what the budget's going to be, who knows when we know that information. But in the current forecast, though, that cut in the last 3 years of the 5-year forecast, that cut is not in there, if that makes sense. So that cut is not in there. So if they do extend that cut, that's $650,000 less that we would have in revenue coming in from the state. Also, just another piece of information, both negotiated contracts are up this summer. And that's just another unknown in this whole thing. Also, since we did not pass a levy last year, this year, we've essentially lost $6.6 million in revenue. So again, the longer you go of not passing a levy, the bigger hole you dig for yourself. And it gets even more and more challenging to dig out of that hole. And so the other piece is, the consequences of passing and failing if we did go in May. Those are other things that just need to be thought through and so forth.
One other thing I want to say, just keep in mind that when a levy passes at any time during a calendar year, it doesn't start to be collected until January or February of the following year. So whether we would pass a levy in May or November of 2021, either way, it would not hit tax bills for citizens, and we would not start to collect until January of 2022. So what we're talking about possibly doing here, if we put something on the May ballot, would not affect taxes until January of 2022. So keep that in mind too. That's one reason you can't wait till you're,
Right.
broke to go pursue a levy.
Right. One encouraging piece of news, certainly accompanied from today, that plays into this is that the Pfizer COVID vaccine was approved by the FDA today, and that will subsequently add and hopefully additional vaccines being available, Moderna and AstraZeneca, certainly help with our local economy by helping people get back to work on a regular basis as well. So that will be a plus for our community. The timing was pretty terrible for our levy in March, with the shutdown happening the night before the election. And then, of course, the perception that goes along with with the revaluation coming out just before the November election. So what millage gets us comparable to what we were asking for before? What?
Right around a 5 to 5.1 mil levy. So 5.7 was $3.3 million last year. A 5.1 mil levy is $3.35 million. So right around there. Probably a 5.08 or something, but
Okay.
somewhere around that range.
Limited levies or emergency levies can be up to 10 years, according to regulation. That's kind of unusual to go that long, but it is an option for us.
Should we, like sequentially go through this, like there's several questions to be answered, right? There's the millage, there's the wind, there's the type.
Right.
So it would make sense to me to be consistent with what we've been asking for, we ask for the same thing again. The same need is there. You combine that with the uncertainty of the state funding. And so I don't think we should be asking for any less than we asked for previously. Recognizing it's less millage, well, it's essentially the same. That requires some level of levies and whatnot that can be challenging for a lot of people. The bottom line is that we want from 5.7 mil levy to essentially 5.1 mil levy, collecting about $3.3 million. So what I would advocate for is the same amount, but we still need the same amount.
The need is still there.
And again, there is a significant risk of state funding continuing. We don't know. We simply don't know. We know we got 650,000 this year. It's going to be 600,000 last year. 650,000 in the current year. We don't know. And so not knowing it isn't a time to react after we find out they're going to continue into the third and fourth year. So I would advocate going for the 5.1 mil levy, so that we can discuss that here ourselves.
Sure. We could. How about we could also pop down through the list of items that you say we need to determine. So really, when is probably the first question. Do we feel that it's appropriate to go to the ballot box for levy this May? I know that that's something that I was.
So you want to talk about when before we talk about how much? Is that correct?
Yeah, just going to go through the list.
My take is it's not getting any better. 3 failures doesn't mean it's not time to ask anymore. 3 failures means we're really hurting now, and it's time to go back again. And so it's May. Firmly.
Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Long, do you want to weigh in on that? Okay.
Did Kevin say, Mr. Price say he's thinking about May?
Yes, he did. He was recommending May.
I think that's okay. I mean, it's definitely an option, but as somebody pointed out, we have levy fatigue. What would be the downside of waiting till November when we have the vaccine, people are going to be able to get out more, we can do more information over the summer?
Okay, I'm gonna repeat what I heard you say. You can correct me. Says that she is hearing that there are folks in the community who have levy fatigue. I can tell you that I have as well, certainly from wanting to advocate for it. And that what is the downside between waiting until November. And from my perspective, the downside is we miss an opportunity to, if we go in May and we are successful, that's good. If not, then we have an opportunity to re-message and help people understand the need that we have more thoroughly for November. It just gives us two opportunities at ballot box instead of just one. Other than that, I don't know whether.
A couple other things,
Negatives.
David. I copy on the levy fatigue, but I more importantly copy on the financial fatigue.
Sure.
Okay, so, people that are fatigued and, chosen to vote no, well, okay, that's their choice, and don't really care if they're fatigued more, so it's, reality of it is, we're facing financial crisis with our schools. We've had draconian cuts that were necessary. And one thing to really keep in mind is that if we go in May, and it passes, then we can begin the school year with the knowledge that we have money coming in January or February.
And that's a big plus.
If we go in November, we're going to start the school year knowing we're going to continue with a reduction in not as much financing. And so we're going to carry over the cuts that have already been defined into the upcoming calendar year or school year next year.
Yeah.
So as you said, there are two reasons to go. Well, what you said, Kevin, what you were going to say.
Yeah.
There are two reasons to go in May. One, it gives us two opportunities so we can receive funding in January, February of 2022. Think about this, right? And then I think just as importantly, we can begin next school year with the restoration of librarians. We can begin next year with the restoration of STEM. We can begin next year with the restoration of art. Begin with the restoration of 85 supplemental positions that we have seen lost. I'm being a bit presumptuous here, but I think that will be the conclusion of once we take a look. We knew we could restore most of those things. The levy passed in November, and so I would think most, if not all, those could also be. But that'll require a little more analysis.
Right.
But going out on a limb here a little bit, making a presumption that those things could indeed be restored, and we could begin the 2021 school year in September or August with a return to near normalcy in what we're providing for our students.
Mm-hmm. Mrs. Luffman?
I think May.
Mike? You think
May.
May?
I would just add that if we are thinking about bringing some things back, I would be really concerned with doing that and going for the same amount, because we have, like I said a minute ago, lost $6.6 million in revenue. So, again, that's a delicate balance of asking for the right amount of money and then what to bring back. But I think we need to further think through that. Again, I would love to bring all those things back. I would love to. However, there's a financial piece to those that if you bring back those things, and let's say you're bringing back $500,000 worth or $300,000 worth, you got to take that really off the amount of the levy, because that's the cumulative amount that we're having to take out from there. So again, I'm not saying we can't do that. We can definitely look into that. I would just be cautious of putting that all together. And that needs to be part of the decision-making process of the amount to ask for is, are we considering bringing some things back and some dollar amounts of those things, or of how those things would add up.
The point being that the hole that's been dug doesn't get filled as we continue forward without any additional financing. So the fact that we now going to miss, for all practical purposes, a year of funding, right? Because if we had passed the levy in November, we would have seen funding arrive in January, February of 2021. Now we're talking about right a year later, and it isn't like mysteriously that whatever was needed in that 3.3 million we were asking for was somehow mysteriously taken care of. So that's really the point, right? We're essentially carrying forward a loss of $3 million But we also look at plan to restore something in the base plan, so if it had passed. So, I myself, I will not certainly hold the treasurer and superintendent for, to this, but I'm someone going out on a limb and projecting a optimistic view of things that we potentially could look at restoring. Certainly, we can restore some of those. Whether we can restore it all, obviously, it takes some more analysis.
Right.
And maybe by then we'll have some insight to what the state's going to do by next year, but not when we have to make a determination on the amount. So if we went the same millage amount, 5.7, we would actually see additional funding come from that. So we either lock in with the same amount we had, or we lock in with the same millage, and we have to make a decision on that. Again, there's three things decided, right? When, kind of here in May.
Yeah.
How much? 5.1 or 5.7, understanding that 5.7 allows us to restore more. But
Right.
essentially garners more money. So I said, I'm actually helping to bring it around.
Yeah, 5.7 would bring in $3.7 million.
Okay.
Or something in between.
Yeah, something in between. It helps.
Again, I'm not necessarily saying that we can't go with 5.1 and bring stuff back. I'm just saying we need to be extremely cognizant of that.
You need to be specific. You can't be here on the fly, I understand.
Right.
Kevin Lyman, were you saying that we should determine this evening the amount so that you can start getting things ready, or can we?
We can ask for multiple choices.
Right, I would just like, it would be easier if we could answer some of these questions, have some of these questions answered in consensus, like, are we going in May, are we going for a continuing or a limited, if so, how many years? And, the other question, of course, is the amount. If we can get some of that decided, and I could have the resolution prepared with a blank in the millage or a blank in the amount. But I hate to have the whole thing blanks all over it, because it's probably going to be a
To
bonding
meet your
attorney.
timeline, what do you need to know tonight? Do we want to consider both 5.1 and 5.7, or do we need to pick one or the other tonight to meet your timeline to lay that earlier?
We don't need to know that tonight, but what I would like to know is if it's the length of time of the levy. Is it going to be continuing, or 5-year, 7-year, or what? That would be the one that.
And if you can get up and you give Kevin and I some guiding information, we can then put some things together and make a recommendation at the next meeting. If you give us some guiding information of type of levy, how many years, are you thinking about bringing a few things back, Kevin and I can then work on that and then bring a recommendation, or maybe a few recommendations back to the next meeting. And we could go from there if that is something that would, what you guys would, and ladies would want.
So I know Kevin was talking about not pressing the timeline. So we don't want one bonding attorney to get COVID.
Exactly.
Do they have some depth there? So if one sick,
Yes.
they go somebody else.
Okay, good.
Yes, that's funny. I've worked with the same one my entire career, though. He's not been there forever. So, but yeah, they have someone else in the office that can take care of it for us.
Yeah, if they get sick, there's another one, or quarantine.
Kevin, want to use your mic?
Yeah, well, usually.
Use your mic.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah, they have several attorneys on staff that know about this.
Several, okay.
Yeah. Yep. And then I guess at some point then, like I was saying earlier, we have to set another special meeting, or a special meeting. I assume sometime between the regular January meeting and the end of January.
Right. We're targeting to have a training session during that time anyway, so that would be convenient.
So regardless of our decision tonight, we're not going to be able to make a concrete enough or define enough decision tonight to obviate the need for a special meeting in January. So
Right.
we're going to have a meeting in January, the normal board meeting, and we're going to have another special meeting to
Right.
actually finalize the.
Right, and I would have to bring that resolution to that first January meeting. He said he can do it with some blanks in it, But I mean, if it's going to be, the language changes a lot. If it's for a limited period, or if it's an emergency levy, or if it's continuing levy, those are the things I need to know. And the more, this is maybe a minor thing, but the more resolutions I have him prepare for me, the more we're going to be paying too. It's not a lot of money.
What is the difference between a limited and emergency levy?
Well, you want?
Yeah, sure. Emergency is a fixed dollar amount. There's no growth on new construction. It's for a fixed dollar amount of just a regular operating levy. It can be either continuing or it can be for a limited amount of years. And you do get growth on new construction.
Okay.
So
So
that's the major differences of that. of those two.
And I think you might have said this, but every emergency levy has to be for a limited amount of time.
Right.
You can't do a continuing emergency.
Up to 10 years.
Right.
So it's not a perpetual emergency.
Right.
Yeah, it's a limited time.
So really, the only two things are the word emergency and the fact that you don't get inflationary growth, am I saying that right, on any emergency levy?
So
New construction.
New construction growth, that's right.
Construction.
Yeah.
How much do we typically get in an average year in dollar terms, not percentages, but just give me some wag, the dollar amount that we get in new construction?
If it's a non-reappraisal year like this one, it's normally like $200,000, $300,000.
Okay.
And that's the total of all the millages we've ever passed. So,
Okay.
A 5 mil levy is going to be whatever, maybe 10% of that amount.
Oh, okay, that's the sum total, okay, not on that specific levy.
Right. That would
So,
be,
yeah, it's gonna be like 10% of that, so maybe it would get you an extra
$20,000.
$25,000
Right.
a year if you went with a continuing levy, a permanent levy versus an emergency levy, because you
Right.
can adjust for new construction every year.
yes.
I know these are total whacks, but it's kind of, we're bounded, so if it's not 1 or 2 million, it's not
Right.
250,000, it's 25,000.
And obviously, the 200,000 is an average, whether we're having a housing boom or the housing industry's going down the tubes like it did 10, 12 years ago, whenever that was.
Yeah, it was.
was.
So I know, Ms. Price, you've advocated for an emergency levy in the past. We had thought at the time maybe 5 years was the limit on it, knowing that it's 10, or maybe we could consider 7. That seems to make it more appealing because that gives us more runway to be able to get a more final solution. Because when it's
Right.
limited, then at some point your needs grow, but then your funding also drops if you
And
have
times out, so I understand the quandary there. As I advocated back in May, and ultimately in our June vote on June 30th, where I was really making a strong pitch for an emergency. And that was because we'd seen 2 levy failures, we're in the middle of the pandemic, and I felt like we needed to convey the message of what we were facing.
Mhm.
And that's why emergency levy does 2 things to a voter. It tells them, it really gets their attention when they walk into the booth and they see emergency. And I think people today really understand when you say emergency, they don't think there's pulling over on them because there's a recognition that our nation and our local communities are in distress.
Mhm.
So and the community's gonna know it's failed 3 times. So what I absolutely believe, we should not go back to continuing levy, because why should we expect it to come out of here? Strike 3, let's do something different. So I think the debate is whether to go continuing, it might be. It's either continuing or emergency. I would advocate emergency.
You mean limited or emergency? So you mean,
Correct.
yes.
Yeah.
Can't read my lips.
Not today.
So, thank you for correcting. So, limited period versus emergency.
Mhm.
The only nuanced difference there is that nominally $25,000 a year we could potentially gain from new construction. That's it. My bet is the nomenclature of emergency carries more weight than the $25,000 a year we might get
Mhm.
over the next few years.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
So my strong belief, May levy, emergency levy, and it conveys the urgency of the situation. And then also say it's for a fixed period of time. So, in my opinion, 10 years is too long, 5 years maybe, but
I
7
guess,
years is maybe a better,
Yeah.
better vision, because when you start looking at other alternatives to funding, whether the state is gonna, in my opinion, get their act together and look at funding our schools appropriately. What I forgot to mention earlier in my little sermon about, school funding, was it currently on average, the audience here is watching, on average currently, school districts get on the order of 44% of their funding from the state. With this Patterson plan, on average, they're going to get 48% of their funding from the state. We get normally about 17%. That's how you look at the numbers, somewhere between 17 and 28% of their funding from the state. That's not changing because of that Patterson plan. So the current plan, hopefully, whichever state will fail. And hopefully, there will be a groundswell from the community, because as board members, we can only do so much. They expect us to gripe and complain and try to, influence them up there. But if we had 300 or 400 people from Bellbrook up there at the state capitol stair steps saying, hey, fix your school funding, that's going to accomplish a whole lot more than me, as I did in the last couple of weeks, contacting state senators, state representatives, and things like that. So it's not going to be quick. It seems like there's a hope just the state is going to fail, because the Senate doesn't like it, because they see what they think is associated with additional funding, what is additional funding. And it's not going to be fixed next year. It's going to be a real big fight to get the state to do what they do. In my mind, every district needs to get over 51%, or they're heavily reliant on property taxes.
Yep.
That's my worldview. So 5 years, I'm not sure I'm optimistic. I guess I'm not optimistic we're ever going to see anything from the state. But I'm quite confident we're not going to see something in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. 6 or 7, maybe, or other alternatives. Where we've talked about potentially the reduction of, it's a very important term here, earned income tax. So if we, and I know there's a revulsion when people hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, we don't have income tax here. If you start thinking about our elderly, those on Social Security, whatnot, if their income is not taxed, and certainly there's an element of those that voted no during the levies that were in those exact categories. I don't know, Dave, if you told me, or someone told me 50% of our community is retired, I don't know, at that age. And so
more than 50% of our voters are 55 and older.
Okay, that's huge and significant. And so for those that are not in favor of the levy, I would really be entertained to hear their defense of not going with the earned income tax. Because if we actually identified property taxes that we would substitute with an earned income tax, so we find $2.5 bill levy or something that's on the books from 1993, and we say we introduce a 0.5% earned income tax, it's ultimately going to replace that. And so then those elderly people are not only going to not pay more taxes, they're actually going to pay less. They're going to see their tax bill go down. So it's pretty hard to have an argument with people that are on fixed income when they're going to see their taxes go down. But there's an educational component to this. It's not going to happen overnight. It's extremely difficult to explain this to people. And so it's not going to happen in 1 year, maybe not 2 years.
It'll take several years.
4 years, 5 years. So all I'd say this, you need to have some time either to realize the benefit from the state.
Yeah.
I think it's probably unrealistic. I think the earned income tax, if it puts off that term, the earned income tax, I think it's going to be left in struggle. At least we can begin that discussion. In the meantime, you've got schools that are burned down. And so I think we should call it what it is. It's an emergency. Put it on the ballot as such, and let the community know the seriousness of the situation.
Mrs. Loughlin?
I'd be willing to go.
Yep. Mrs. Allen? No. Okay.
What did Mrs. Hoffman say? She'd be willing to go with what?
She says I'd be willing to go with that.
The emergency?
Yes, and we're talking probably more than 5 years, less than 10, probably 7. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be okay.
Okay, then, and certainly for our first, opportunity to hear, what it has to say, what the bond
Right,
person has to say about that too.
right. I think I have enough to get him to do a resolution, maybe leave a blank
Okay,
for the millage or something.
okay.
Or,
And we can talk
the rest
more about millage based on getting some more information about what the cost could be to come back and so forth. Okay,
So emergency 7 years, and the millage depends on what we're bringing back and so forth.
right,
We're thinking anywhere between 5.1 and 5.7 mils. I know if it's emergency, it's gonna be dollar amount, but
right.
that dollar amount, is that what we're, is
Maybe.
that what we're thinking?
May ballot.
And
Maybe.
yes.
Okay, so Kevin and I will come up with some recommendations based on that information for the January meeting, if
That'd be great.
that's okay?
That'd
Okay,
be great.
we'll do that.
Concurrence, yeah.
Okay.
Mrs. Owens, that sound fine with you? Okay. I'm seeing you nod, but I didn't hear anything, so.
Yes,
Okay, great.
it's hard because I have kids and adults, so I have to.
I know, we heard your dog going once or twice too, so we appreciate that. We're
She
glad
was in
that
the room, she was out of there. She was in the room.
we thank her for her support, for his support. All right, anything more with levy discussion? All right, we'll get the, time for our open communication, I'll grab the sheet. Vince, the second about the cross. You see the podium now, Mr. Long?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
I'm showing my age in glasses. For those who don't know me, my name is Vince Mulsey. I'm the head coach of the boys lacrosse team. I'm here to request a reassessment of the elimination of both the boys and girls JV lacrosse teams. I've made a couple of previous proposals, such as coaches forfeiting salary to bridge the gap, community members raising money, or even a financial assessment that demonstrates it's financially beneficial to the school district to maintain the JV lacrosse programs. Responses I received, that's not something we can do. It would not be fair to the other programs that were also cut, and that option is not sustainable. I haven't had the opportunity to respond to these comments, so I'd like to do that now. In terms of fairness, I would argue the lacrosse program has been disproportionately impacted by the cuts. I've been told that the lowest level team from each sport was cut, but I still see there is JV golf, tennis, and cross country. No cuts to those programs. Also, many of the freshman teams that were cut haven't had teams for several years. Baseball and football are examples. So really, not all teams were impacted by this. The statement that it would not be fair to the other programs that were cut doesn't really make sense. This is a financial issue, it's nothing more. It's been communicated that these cuts were about finances, not fairness. Other programs have been cut, such as ROTC, they've been brought back, so the board has demonstrated a willingness to reassess. As it relates to sustainability, which is brought up in relation to coaches declining salary. I'd like to remind the board, prior to 2018, the lacrosse program had flourished, dating all the way back to 2010, with no paid coaches. That includes 2 state championships during that time. While we as coaches appreciate the salary we receive, we do this as a way to give back to the community. And we do it for nothing. I know that's not sustainable for the long term, but we want to do our part. In terms of finances, I've updated the budget projections that were provided at the previous board meeting. The following updates have been made to the projections. I have added the girls program into the projection. I have included the current coaches' salaries, and I've included revenue from the gate for the stadium at home games. That stadium gate is a conservative estimate. That assumes one parent per player from both teams. If anyone would like to challenge that assessment, that projection, I would ask you to do so. But what I will tell you is I have run the program for 10 years. I manage the budget, not only for the high school team, but the full youth program. And I've been doing projections for this for 10 years. I think I know this better than anybody in the room. What's important to note is there's very few additional expenses with the JV program. When we put a program in place, when you start with varsity, you have some cost. And when you add the JV, there's very little additional cost. Projection I've provided to you, and I think this is very important. With the current coaches that you have, 2 paid supplemental positions, varsity only, and this covers both boys and girls, the school district faces a loss of $5,490 based upon the projection. If you add the JV, there is a projected gain, $5,679. That's a difference of over $11,000. There's been an awful lot of discussion about the financial trouble the school district is facing. $11,000 isn't a lot on that total budget, but it's a step in the right direction. And I'm happy to sit down with any one of you, review the projections, and poke holes in it. Finally, not speaking as a coach who's seen a program decimated by a cut, but as a member of the community for the last 24 years, and a taxpayer. I find it disingenuous to present budget cuts to the community and be unwilling to entertain the thought that a mistake has been made. It is obvious that the cuts that are being made are not only to save money, but in this case also punitive to the community, because in this cut, in this instance, the cut actually creates additional hardship to the financial well-being of the district. Finally, as a taxpayer, I would expect the school board and superintendent not only to provide the best educational opportunities for the students of this community, but to be good stewards of the tax dollars that they are providing. I am not requesting a reinstatement of the supplemental position that has been cut, and in fact would be happy to return to the status held in 2017 as a school club with no paid coaches. We would all be held to the same standards as all the other coaches within the school, and our student athletes would be held to the same standards of all the other student athletes. I welcome any questions that you have by the superintendent, treasurer, and board to review the budget projections and identify any errors or omissions. I understand the ideal solution would be passage of a levy, but in light of our current situation, now is the time to consider all other alternatives to provide the best possible educational opportunities for our students. I am simply looking for any solution that will provide as many opportunities for our student athletes as possible. I'm willing to sacrifice my own time and money for this. I ask that the board consider the positive financial impact and consider that there are other options. I welcome the opportunity to work with you and find a solution that provides the best possible benefit for our community. I'm going to emphasize, there's been a lot of discussion about the impact of the finances. We're willing to do our part. We'll make that sacrifice financially. All we're asking, let the kids play. There's no need to punish them. I'll sacrifice. I got a full coaching staff that will. But let them play.
I have a question here for you. When you said, I think I misunderstood you. Without the JV, I thought you said it was going to be a loss of $400 to the district.
Yeah.
And, okay, to me that means we're spending more money than we got, right? So we got to spend $5,400 to make this team effective, or put it in place, correct?
If you go varsity only for both boys and girls, school district loses close to $5,500.
In other words, we got to pay $5,500.
You're putting out more money than you're bringing in.
But then you said if you had the JV, it was going to
Profit?
So it becomes a zero?
No,
Yes.
positive $5,500. This is an $11,000 swing based upon the projection.
Okay, so there's no cost to the district, is what you're saying. If you have a varsity and.
Not only is there no cost to the district, you bring money in, you also provide the opportunity to possibly fund something else that's been cut.
All right. This kind of falls into the realm of the administrative function of the district. This is difficult for board members. It's not the level of detail we typically bore down into. So we're going to have to turn the superintendent, the treasurer to look at this.
But you can certainly make a recommendation, Danny.
Yes.
Yes. Because again, that's not my purview. That's not what I do. I don't write spreadsheets out and try to figure out.
Understood.
We get the recommendations, from the superintendent, from the treasurer. And I'd like to look at that spreadsheet though, because I find it surprising that we're in the hole just with varsity, but if we have JV, it goes completely the other direction. So
You should have a copy right in front of you.
What interesting. Okay, good. Oh, yeah, I'm right. I remember seeing that now.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you very much.
Dr. Switz, any questions?
Nope, I will get back to you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you so much. I find your offer very generous and totally for our kids, and I appreciate that. Give us a little time to think about it.
Like I said, it's not about me, and I understand we're in a spot financially, and when we're in that spot, everybody needs to give a little bit.
Yes.
I'm willing to do so, my coaches are willing to do so. All we want to do is give those kids an opportunity. They shouldn't be punished because a levy isn't passing. And if somebody's willing to take that option, then it's a step, and I think it shows something to the community that as educators, as coaches, as board members, as superintendents, we will look for every opportunity we have to support them and give them those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, that was the only open communication person who signed up, so thank you very much, Vince. Going on to new business, Dr. Kozak.
Nope, okay, that's all, that's communication, I'm sorry. I just want to, before we go on to that, can I make a comment about lacrosse here? Again, just, when we're making cuts, these are the cuts that we made in February 2019. February 2019 with the levy, we didn't pass the levy last March. And I would say that every single one of those cuts are extremely negative to our students. Every one of them. When we look at this cuts of 33 positions, STEM at the elementary level, 85 supplementals, world languages at the middle school, these are all opportunities that our students deserve. And, I want to give our students, our student athletes, our students academically, every opportunity that they need. However, 3 levy failures are really putting us in a long-term financial situation. And so I will definitely look at this spreadsheet and highly consider these things. But there are other programs that are just as important as these. Because, programs or clubs, there were kids fit in or find things to do and that are valuable. For example, the board club at the middle school, that was cut. What is that? That's kids getting together, playing some board games. Is that what it's really about? No. It's about them socializing, trying to work out with other people, trying to those life skills that we were talking about earlier. And so every single one of these cuts, we shouldn't have to make these cuts. But our community has said three times, $4.8 million, we don't want to support you at the ballots. And that's what they said. And so looking at this long-term sustainably, all these cuts are extremely impactful to all of us. And so we're trying to look big picture at the whole situation. Because if we could go back in time and not cut any of these positions or any of these clubs, any of these activities, these are missed opportunities for students. But there's a wide variety of missed opportunities for students.
I'm asking those
so-
to do the analysis
Okay.
on all those programs, but I was trying to get the school line to break even. And as a school board, it is your duty to bring those programs back. You should not just cut a program without.
Hold on.
Can I respond to that?
No, we're moving on here. We're moving on. This is open communication. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. If you want.
I was just gonna say, this is Dr. President's opportunity to speak.
Again, I don't want to deny any kids any opportunity. However, 3 times at the ballot box, our voters have said, we don't want to provide all these opportunities for our kids. That's what they've said with their vote. That's what their vote. That's what they've said. Because we've been extremely financially reasonable and fiscally responsible in the school district. We have been. And so these are hard decisions. I know. You know, these are hard decisions. All of them are not easy. We want every opportunity. I want to give every opportunity to every student as possible, because you never know when that light's going to click on or they make that connection with somebody. But you know, at some point in time, there has to be hard decisions made, and it's extremely unfortunate. But that's the path we're going down, folks. That's the path. I don't want to get on my soapbox here. That's the path we're going down as a community. The less money we have is there's people behind. Those means less programs. There's people behind those programs. That's the path we're going down. We're going down less electives, less activities, bigger class sizes. That's the path we're going down, unless we do something. And to try to pick and choose things becomes extremely challenging. Doesn't mean it can't be done. It just becomes extremely complicated and challenging when we say this program or activity is worthy, this one is not. And just extremely challenging. All right, on new business?
Yes, yes, please.
All right, thank you. Licensed certificated staff employment resignation, leave of absence, supplemental duty. Recommend approval to amend motion number 2244, November 12, 2020, reflect a reduction in stipend for Deborah Sweeterman. That's high school competition cheer advisor from 100% to 49% for the 2021 school year.
Right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Second.
Mrs. Long? Any questions? Are we, is it because the season is shorter or the?
No, we're gonna have, she's splitting with other people,
Okay,
so that's gonna come and be here.
okay, I see.
Yep.
Very good, thank you. All right, call the roll.
All right, Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Be resolved, the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education has offered these supplemental duty positions via posting to licensed employees of the district. The board either had no qualified licensed employee applicants or no employees applied before these positions were offered to non-licensed persons. The following non-licensed persons have met qualifications for the board posting of supplemental duty positions as noted below. Recommend approval of the following supplemental duty contracts for the 2021 school year. Nicole Cousins, Holly Levine, and Janelle Terrell, they're each at 17% of head coach.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Second.
Mr. Price? Any questions? I see that 17 times 3 is up to 51, so there we are, yes. All right, call the roll, please.
Okay, Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, motion passes.
Recommend approval of the following supplemental duty volunteers for the 2021 school year. Richard Anderson, Alex Fryman, Andrew Goodpaster, Todd Draper, Jonathan Rose, and Kate Weston.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Long, second, Mrs. Sloughman. Any questions, comments? All right, please call the roll.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long.
Yes.
motion passes.
Recommend approval of the following substitute teachers for the remainder of the first semester for 2021 school year. Heather Everett, Wyatt Gasper, Jennifer Cousins, Tanya Manley, and Barbara Oxner.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Long, and second by Mrs. Sloughman. Any questions, comments? Glad to see these are additional substitute teachers. This is great news.
Yep, and a few of them are, we sent out an email really asking for some folks that had four-year degrees that didn't have teaching degrees to come and help them. A few of them have stepped to the plate, so we really appreciate that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Mr. Lonnie, call the roll.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
motion passes.
Recommend approval of increase in time for bus driver Dina Harper from 3 to 4 hours effective November 18th, 2020.
Your motion,
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Second.
Mr. Price? Any questions? All right, call the roll, please.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
motion passes.
Recommend acceptance of resignation of custodian Gary Baker effective end of day on December 4th, 2020.
It's a motion,
So moved.
Mr. Price, second by Mrs. Long. Any questions or comments? All right, please call the roll.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, motion passes.
Recommend approval of limited employment contract for Richard Burball as building custodian effective December 7th through 2021 school year, under 9 days, 7 hours a day, step 0.
We have a motion, Mrs. Long,
Second.
Mr. Price? Okay, call the roll.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long.
Yes.
motion passes.
Recommend a revision of motion number 20-238, November 12th, 2020, modified date of resignation for transportation coordinator Beverly Wetzel to January 31st, 2021.
All right, I will make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Price? Thank you so much. Any questions or comments? All right, please call the roll.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
motion passes.
Recommend approval of limited employment contract for Jake Wilhite as transportation coordinator, step 1, class 6, 230 days, effective December 17th, 2020 through June 30th, 2021.
We have a motion,
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman and Mr. Price, second.
And
And Mr. Wolfite is the new transportation
Yes.
coordinator, and Mrs. Wetzel is going to help bring him up to speed through the first month of January.
yes, again, we really appreciate Ms.
Yes.
Wetzel
Yes, we do.
extending her resignation for a month so she can, again, just the quality person that she is, she wants, and she has built a great transportation department, and she wants an extremely successful handoff and continuation of that. And so she has agreed to stay on for another month. Mr. Wilhite is a sub-bus driver in Centerville, also has worked in management at Walgreens, and so he has a passion for transportation. He's going to do a great job.
All right, please call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
motion passes.
Recommend approval of voluntary transfers for Kimberly Hanson from special needs assistant, library media specialist, effective February 1st, 2021, 189 days, 7 hours a day, step 5.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Second.
Mr. Price?
And Mrs. Hanson was formerly at BCI as the media specialist last year.
Excellent. Any questions or comments? All right, please call the roll.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, motion passes.
Recommend approval of all substitute teachers, school nurse, and support staff for the second semester of the 2021 school year. This list is in your packet, sorry.
And Mrs. Long? I will-
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman? This is the list that is bright pink in the packet.
By state law, we have to now recommend them in the middle of the year for the second semester.
Yes. And so this is, and then also the goal sheet, that's the substitute support staff. And, okay, so that's the total of both of those. We have a, we get the motion, Mrs. Long and Mrs.
Yeah, motion second. We're gonna have to vote yet.
All right, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Long.
Yes.
motion passes.
Recommend approval of the 2021 meeting calendar for the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education.
And we have a motion,
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman
Second.
and Mrs. Long. So this meeting calendar continues to be on Thursdays at second Thursday of the month, 7 p.m. It has additional special meetings, preloaded, so to speak, on February 25th, April 22nd. June 30th is a normal special meeting to do the annual financial reports approval. August 26th, and then October 28th, so there are 4 additional special meetings scheduled for reporting opportunities for us.
So the additional special meetings are intended, you mentioned the purpose of the normal special. We know we're gonna have another special in January for the levy consideration. Other ones, can you explain a little better what we're gonna do with those?
Looking at including some of the reports that we get, reports to the board, to include those as a special meeting. Our meetings tend to run very late, and that gets some of those lengthy discussions in a meeting designated just for that versus spending the time in the personnel approval and contract approval and things like that. So things like updates on the strategic plan, on the state school report card, those kinds of things.
We also have, if I can add, preventive maintenance plan. We have a planning on doing that in February, of updating on that. Also our school bus replacement plan, which I think we'll have a pretty good plan, but I don't know if we have the money to fully implement it, but we do have a plan. And then also curriculum kind of things, course of study, those are things that we can cover at those meetings also, just provide some more information.
And we can always cancel a meeting if we get to that point and we don't have a big agenda.
Correct. All right.
So I don't want to muddy the water here, but do we want to just approve this meeting calendar as is and then add a special meeting in January, or do we want to put that January meeting into this, into the meeting plan? I'm sorry, into the meeting calendar, and we would have to know if we could do that board retreat in January.
Right, we should be able to do the board retreat in January. I'm not sure we have a specific date available for us.
I talked with OSBA, and they have everything available except the end of February. I know that's not January, but all of January they're available. I know one board member said January 9th they were not available, so I don't know if the 16th or the 23rd would be a date for that. It would be we're looking at a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I know our OSBA rep is available 16th or 23rd. We could put it in the calendar, and that way we can do the
Sure.
the second reading of the levy, and then also do with the board retreat or other business that we have.
So we would, so January 23rd. Is that Martin Luther King weekend?
One of them is, I don't think.
I think the weekend before
16th.
that, the 16th.
16th is Martin Luther King.
His birthday is the
18th.
15th. So,
The 23rd works much better for me because I just happen to think if we go 16th, that's only a few days after the first resolution,
right,
where I'd have to get I'd have to get response from the county auditor and the resolution from the bonding attorney.
Mhm.
I probably could pull it off the 23rd if we got a choice. I would love that more than the 16th.
okay. All right, well, let's mark the January 23rd as a special meeting as well.
So we're adding January 23rd to the board meeting calendar.
Yes,
It's a special meeting.
as a special meeting. We'll identify the place. All right, so I would move that we amend the proposed calendar to include January 23rd. Is there a motion, or is there a second to the motion on the amendment? Mr. Price? And Mr. Price is seconding. So we're voting on the amendment to the proposed calendar. Can you call the roll?
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes,
and Mr. Price.
Yes.
Okay, and now voting to approve the whole calendar as amended. Can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
yes,
and Mr. Price.
Yes.
All right, motion passes as amended. All right, going on to items of information or discussion. Board representative to the Greene County Career Center and Financial Advisory Committee. Mary's passing has left a couple of openings. And one in the Greene County Career Center. She was our representative to their board. And it's not a requirement that a board member from our board is appointed to represent Bellbrook at the Greene County Career Center board, although that is the common scenario. So that's something to think about. And Mary was also our representative on the Financial Advisory Committee, which really we do the financial advisory of those appointments in January anyway.
Correct.
So-
I mean, those both could wait till January, definitely. Just as items of information to start thinking about. Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Yeah,
So we're gonna have somebody outside, sorry. We're gonna have somebody outside the school board that says the representative of the Greene County Career Center. What's our methodology for filling that? Just
we can,
designate, are we gonna advertise, are we gonna solicit? I mean, how are we, retcon? I mean, what's the protocol for that?
we don't have a set protocol. We can have a volunteer from the board, or the board can make a recommendation.
So it's not prescribed by law or school board policy, right? So
No,
it's
it
just-
is not. It's not, there's no specific,
Is this a board decision or is it administrative function?
it's a board decision.
So we need to decide at some point.
Right.
For what it's worth, it's always been a board member, never, but it doesn't happen. That law changed, what, 5 years ago or something like
Right,
that,
right.
where it could be a community person.
So
I think we should
something-
be open to the opportunity of using somebody outside the board. Obviously, all of us are pretty tasked as it is, throw one more additional duty on it. If we could get some well-qualified, passionate person to interface with the career center, as their new board, as a board member, but not as a board member. I think that would be a plus. I think we could get more attention to it. This is what.
Right, and we want to stay in communication with what's happening with the Greene County Career Center, so a liaison. Certainly want, if it wasn't a board member, it would be somebody we want to hear from on a regular basis as well.
Yeah, talk,
Sorry, go ahead.
talked to Dave Gaskins, who's the Greene County Career Center Superintendent today. So he said, again, for what it's worth, there is one school district, Fairborn, that has a non-school board member as a member on the Greene County Career Center. He's a former Fairborn school board member that just continued on. And he said the biggest key for him is just communication back to the school district of whoever that individual is, and making sure there's consistent communication going on between the career center and the school board and the school district. And that was his major piece. And there's an application for that, and it would run through 2022, the end of 2022 is when it turns out.
So are we gonna decide now, next meeting, or?
We can decide that next meeting, about, think about that and maybe check with, if you're interested or if, you have someone that you think you might want to recommend.
And we could consider even some of the applicants that were recently applied for the school board. Those are, somewhat vetted applicants, and so we can only select one person for the vacant school board position. So some of the applicants might be worthy of consideration.
That's true.
For this, so if we can ponder that as we think about, we spent 30 minutes with, 9 people we're not going to select for the board. So that's something to think about.
It is. All right, and on to board retreat for January 2021. We have decided in a previous item that it will be January 23rd. All right. All right, we are now going into executive session for the purpose of considering employment and compensation of a licensed public employee and the appointment of a public official per revised code 121.22, paragraph G1. Do I have a motion to do so?
So,
Mr. Sloughman, second by Mr. Price.
second,
All right, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes. And we do intend to make one more motion and complete the appointment of licensed public, of a public official after we return from executive session. All right, we were out of executive session at 10:01. And, okay, we are all back here. Got Karen. He's still there, great. All right. So we have one last item to complete, and that is the appointment. I'll read the resolution. Whereas a vacancy has been caused on the Board of Education by reason of the passing of a board member, and whereas this Board of Education has legal authority to fill a vacancy for the unexpired term thereof, now therefore be it resolved by a majority vote of all remaining members of the Board of Education of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek School District that Audra Dorn be and hereby is appointed to serve as a member of the Board of Education of this school district for the unexpired term of Mary R. France beginning December 11, 2020, ending on December 31, 2021. And so moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Price. I think this one will just call the roll. Mr. Carpenter is a yes. Mrs. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Motion passes. Congratulations, Mrs. Dorn, and our condolences as well. So it's welcome. We had quite a number of very excellent candidates for the position, and I will reach out to all of them, thank them for their willingness to be interviewed. Chris, you're here, and thank you so much. You were a great contender for this spot. Dr. St. Pierre, the same. Thank you very much. And I'll reach out to the remainder as well. So, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Second.
Mr. Price, and roll call, Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
and Mr. Carpenter, yes. We are adjourned at
9:59.
10:05.